Hi again everyone, welcome to another paint tutorial from Promethean Paints. I'm Ian and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted the plasma gun on the Knight Abhorrent. This is part 3 of the painting tutorial series. So as you see, based on the first video we've created our blues and silvers and golds. Now for the glowing effect. So I use AK Intense White and a really old brush here. Slightly watered down the paint on the wet palette, and I just base coat the coils of the sort of big coils of the gun in this white using the big brush. The actual coils have just been primed in a standard black. For the smaller areas I use a slightly smaller brush, like a size 2 or a size 1 brush, still using the intense white. So I paint the main coils. I also paint some of the vents towards the end of the gun in the white as well, making sure just we get a nice pure white. So it can take 2 or 3 coats, especially if it's over black. Just a nice pure white base coat. So the main idea here, like with all our glowing effects, the brighter it is, the hotter it is, the colder it is, the darker it is. I wanted the heat to be coming from the sort of bottom parts of the plasma core, so the sort of centre of the gun, which means the bottom halves of the plasma core, so the bottom half of the top one and the top half of the bottom one, as it were. So it looks like it's coming from the core of the gun. On the vents on the side of the gun, it's coming from the middle. And the vents on the end of the gun, like towards the barrel, it's sort of coming towards the side furthest away from the barrel. So everything looks like the main source is coming from the core of the gun. See, I'm calling it a plasma gun. You know, usually plasmas can be blue, but I wanted a nice deep orangey red look to this, a bit like it's matching the engine core that we did on our last video. Now all the freshen paints work really well over white. We will be using the airbrush to get this done a bit quicker, and I sometimes find that the freshen paints work best through the airbrush over these larger areas, especially because you get the nice haloing effect, especially with the white ink that we'll be doing. Now there is a possibility you could use the sponge effect, which I see at the moment. It's doing the rounds. It looks like a nice way of getting airbrush effects, but with using makeup sponges. I am going to be trying this out, and I will, if it works, do a couple of videos on it, but I'm just not sure how the freshen paints work using the sponge. But for the time being, we will be using an airbrush. So I'm using some Liquitex White Ink straight through the airbrush. Now what I'm doing here is I'm aiming the airbrush towards where I want the glow to be most intense, so towards that bottom edge there, and letting the overspray just hit the outside of the gun. Those vents there, I'm just spraying into the middle of the vent. So where you want to be most intense, you aim the nozzle of the airbrush in the center of that. Then your natural overspray gradient, the halo effect that you get from the airbrush, just then gradients that paint out, and you get a natural transition from the really, really bright to the really, really dark. So just work around the model, just adding in these gradients where the heat from the plasma gun, the glow from the coils will be pulsing out. So moving on to some Green Stuff World fluorescent inks, I'm using fluorescent orange and fluorescent yellow. These are the Green Stuff World fluorescent inks. And it's about a 70-30 mix in favour of the orange. So 3 drops of fluorescent orange, 1 drop of fluorescent yellow. So we get a nice rich orangey yellow fluorescent colour. And the idea here is we just spray over everything we've just painted, all of the white coils, spray over the vents, and it doesn't matter if you get a bit of overspray as well over some of the other surrounding areas. So you can see we've already got a quite sweet glowing effect already. I'll just turn the light off and just show you there. That's what it looks like when there's just daylight coming through. It's also sometimes nice just to darken your area down a little bit, because sometimes there's some white paint left over, but where it's so bright you don't quite notice with the fluorescent paint. So just take your time to just make sure everything's done. I then make a 50-50 mix now of fluorescent magenta from Green Stuff World and fluorescent orange from Green Stuff World. Again, both the inks. Now, this mix is used to darken down some surrounding areas. I'll put the lights back on in a minute. So this colour is used on the surrounding areas just to darken them down, but it actually helps warm them up a little bit. So the orange is left in the main coils, and I'm trying with the airbrush, like we did with the engine block, to use the overspray of the airbrush, but I'm just skimming the tops of those coils, trying to keep the airbrush away, using different angles from the middle of those coils, so the paint is only catching the raised areas, so it's sort of cooling down all of the surrounding areas but leaving the coils in that bright orangey yellow. And the next stage, for some more cooling, I use the Green Stuff World Fluorescent Red with a little drop of Fluorescent Magenta. So this is more favouring the Fluorescent Red, so it's probably 3 drops of Fluorescent Red, 1 drop of Magenta. And it's the same process again, where I'm just cooling down the extremities, so the areas that are furthest away from those plasma coils are getting a coating of this, and again the tops of the coils. So just using the overspray and the angle of the airbrush so that the overspray just catches the tips of those coils. And what this will do is it will cool down the areas. So really I'm sort of aiming the nozzle of the airbrush on the metal framework so that the overspray just catches where the glowing is. So you just need to be careful here that we don't get any of these cooler colours into the actual coils or vents themselves. But in cooling it down with these colours, you're adding intensity to your glowing effect. So without the darks, you can't have the brights, and without the brights, you can't have the darks. So what we're doing here is we've started off really, really bright, and now we're adding cooler, warmer looking fluorescent colours to add depth to our glowing effects. Now you can wash your airbrush out now if you want, or you can just add a few drops of Vallejo red ink. Any red ink is fine here, as long as it's a dark red ink, and the Vallejo red ink is dark straight out. And again, this now will tone down quite heavily the glowing effect and create a dark redness that looks like the radiance is running out. Is the area is hot now. Not necessarily glowing, but it's just hot, it's red hot. So only paint this into the deepest areas away from your glowing effect, a little bit here and there on the framework. Trying again to keep it away from the inside of those coils. You can airbrush across the top of the coils, but just don't get it inside the coils. As you can see, I use different angles, angling the airbrush so it just only ever so slightly catches the top. So you get overspray on your fingers and on your workbench, but you don't get any of that spray inside those coils. So there it is with the light off, so you can see how much it's toned down, but that intensity has grown. So I have a little bit of watered down intense white, I just paint this into the bottom parts of the coils, almost letting the watered white, as I smash my camera, pull down into just the bottom parts of the coils where we want it to be the most hot. And then back to the airbrush. You could brush this on, but I just wanted to use the airbrush because I just wanted to get some of that natural overspray that we get. And I just airbrush pure intense, pure Green Stuff Well fluorescent yellow ink. To spray that directly over the white, so that we get a really, really bright core, which pulses then out to our orangey red magenta colour. just to tone down some of the glow, I use a little bit of watered down fluorescent red from Green Stuff World and just paint that into the vents themselves. You won't lose much intensity, but it will just darken them down but add that warmth that the fluorescent red gives us. Just so it shows that the core of our gun is really hot where those coils are. It's still hot on the outside, but it's not as intense. It draws our eye more into the core of that gun. And next up with some dry brushing again, we're just going to be adding some cooler colours now, again to intensify our glowing effect, but also to add some sort of what we sort of see in the real world around glowing effects, especially when things are just burnt and they're burnt out and all crusty. So very gently, I've got some AK Black Red, and I just do some dry brushing very lightly over the tops of the coils, and I just try and catch some edges here and there. This is very dark, so you need to do very light on this. Don't get it into any of those middle parts of the coils, but just catch the rib parts of the coils, the bits that are furthest away, and this will really darken it down, and again it will make our glowing effect really bright. Try and steer clear of getting any dry brush on those bottom part of the ribs, almost like the glowing effect is almost whiting out all of that bottom part. And then after that I use some AK Tenebrous Grey and do an even lighter dry brush over the very top part of the ribs. Very light, very subtle, but quite effective. And there we go. One extremely hot red plasma gun, which looks great under normal day, under the spotlights, great in daylight as well. Natural light, it will look fantastic on the tabletop. It will really stand out. You can use that method over any large gun. You can use those methods over the small plasma guns, but some steps you could skip just because of the size differences. But over the large weapons, it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed part 3. In part 4, it's all of the freehand, the eyes, the lightning on the shoulder pads and on the legs. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, share your images of how you've gotten on, and happy painting, my fellow painters.